name is Anibal Sanjam. I'm here today to present my work with my advisor, Dr. Walid Saad, on data injection attacks on smart grids. So let's first start with an outline of the talk. We'll first present some motivation of the problem, give some problem description, what are we working on, what other people has worked on before, and then present our own contribution. We'll then go through the system model, give some background information about energy markets and state estimation, and then we'll present our data injection model. After that, we'll go through the problem formulation, where we formulate two games, as we'll explain later on, to model the interaction between the many attackers and defenders in our games, or in our model. The two games are, the first one, the static noncooperative game, the second one, the Stackelberg game. These will all be explained in details later on. And after presenting those games, we'll provide an analysis of those games and present the solution and equilibrium of those games, give some numerical analysis and some simulation results, and then at the end provide the conclusions of our work. All right, so what's data injection attack to start with? It's a type of attacks that can target cyber-physical systems. Cyber-physical system security is the main interest of my research with Dr. Saad. So the application of data injection in our case is mainly targeting the security of cyber-physical systems. So, and in that application, it mainly targets the state estimator of the power system, or that of a smart grid. The way of doing that is to mainly target the system measurement devices or the communication links connecting those measurement devices to the data acquisition system. And the main aim of doing so is to alter the real-time system state estimation. So there's a state estimator trying to estimate the real-time operation of the system. If we mess up that system, we can get a fake estimate of how the system really operates. And this will affect, of course, the operation of the whole system and the pricing, as we will see. So in our case here, our application is that the attacker wants to do all that attack to try to gain some financial benefit through manipulating the prices of electricity around the market or in the network. So what has been done before in that topic? Starting in 2009, there was one paper that introduced a type of stealthy data injection attack on state estimation, meaning that an attacker can actually carry out an attack, affect the state estimation by much, but still be undetected or unnoticeable by the system operator. So it's mainly that attack is stealthy, but still has an effect on the system. So that has triggered so much work in that field afterwards. So many other researchers started to investigate the effect of such attack. How can they affect, let's say, the pricing? How can they affect the economic efficiency of the market or the economic behavior of the market? What about the operation of the power system, and so on and so forth? And then some other researchers started studying what's the optimal way of an attacker, while staying stealthy, attacking that system. So, and some other researchers started looking at the problem from the other side as well, from the side of the defender. How can we defend the system in an optimal manner to try to defend and make it less vulnerable to such attacks? So with all that being said, what's yet to be investigated in that field? So that's a power system, okay? It's an IEEE 9 bus system. It's a test system. It has 3 generators, G1, G2, and G3, 3 loads, load A, B, and C, and 9 buses. A bus is mainly a node in the network, in our network. It's called a bus in the power systems world. So there is measurement devices that are spread around that system. And those measurement devices take measurement and send them to a data acquisition system. And that data acquisition system is responsible for acquiring that data, analyzing it, and take some actions. Okay, so it can be operations actions, security actions, and so on and so forth. So what has been done already is that there is an attacker that's stealthy. That attacker can inject data in those measurements while staying stealthy and affecting the end result of the state estimation process. And as we said, some other researchers started to look at the problem from the other side, from the side of the defender. How can we defend that system while attacks are being carried out on our system? However, obviously, there is a huge strategic interaction between that attacker and the defender. In other words, the attacker is trying to carry out an attack. If that attack is successful, he mainly or she mainly affects directly the system, hence it affects the objective of the defender, which is the system operator. And on the other side, the defender, while taking some defensive action, he or she tries to block an attack, and it means that it affects the attacker objective directly as well. So the actions are highly coupled, and they affect each other in a conflicting manner. So there should be a good and deep analysis of how this strategic interaction happens between those entities. That's one. And two, what happens if there is multiple attackers? all the work that has been done before mainly focus on the case of there is one attacker trying to attack that system. But what happens if there is multiple attackers? That's a network system. And because of that network nature, an attack on one side of the system affects the objective of another attacker at another location in the system. And hence there is also a strategic interaction between those attackers as well. This interaction can be on the one side conflicting, on the other side can be complementary, but in any way it needs to be modeled, right? So our work mainly focuses or introduces a framework for analyzing the strategic interaction between multiple data injection attackers and a defender trying to defend that system. So after introducing our a briefing of our work and our contribution, let's go through a background information about energy markets. So what's mainly energy markets, or the restructuring of the electric energy market that we hear about a lot? It's mainly this market is now split between the wholesale market, that's a competitive market, and the retail market. The retail market mainly incorporates the distribution side of the system, while the wholesale market incorporates the transmission and generation side. And as I said, the wholesale market is mainly a competitive market, meaning that there is many market participants, be it generation owners, load-serving entities, financial entities, energy brokers, transmission line owners. All those people are participants in a market. They submit energy bids and offers, and then there is a clearing of that market that's done by a market operator known as the independent system operator. Okay? If we look at the right side, the picture here on the right side, we can see the 10 different ISOs, or independent system operators, that operate the 10 different regions in the US. Here, being in Virginia, we're part of PJM. So let's look at the areas they cover. Let's look first at PJM, for example, where we are. The snapshot on the left side, that has been taken yesterday at 8:52 a.m. We can see the prices of electricity at the wholesale level. So that's not the retail side. It's not our houses. It's on the wholesale level where energy is sold in bulk sums more than on the distribution side. So here, if we look at the left side, we can see that the market at that time was pretty much homogeneous, right? So the price of electricity is mainly equal, almost equal, all over the area covered by PJM. But after around 1 hour and a half, we can see that the prices have changed somehow. And we can see that there was an increase in the price of electricity at the wholesale level in the Maryland and Delaware region, right? It has a, right there, it has a, okay. It has a more darker color, meaning it's now the price is in between $40 and $70 per megawatt. If we look at another market, that's the Midwest ISO or Mid-Continent ISO market. You can see also the electricity prices at all the region covered by MISO. At the left side, that snapshot was taken at 10:12 a.m. yesterday. You can see there is a huge difference in prices in between the many regions in that market, right? And then if we look at the right side, that was 6 minutes later. We can see also that there has been a lot of changes in that 6 minutes windows between the two prices profile. So how does that market work? Okay, how are those prices generated mainly? So this market is mainly split into two main markets. There is a lot of markets that go in that energy market umbrella. But the two main markets that we are interested in are the day-ahead market and the real-time market. So what's the day-ahead market? Market participants that are generation owners or load-serving entities or third-party participants like energy brokers, financial entities, or all those people or entities submit their generation offers and demand bids for the next day on an hourly basis. That's why it's the day-ahead market. So everything is submitted for the next day operation. And this is all based, because it's for the next day, it's all based on predictions, right? So you predict how much someone can produce, for example, for the next day, and gives an offer, right, with the demand or with the price cost. Same for a load-serving entity. They predict how much load they need to meet on the next day. So it's all based on prediction. And how does the market operator or the independent system operator clear that market? This is done through the solution of an optimization problem known as the security constraint economic dispatch or the security constraint optimal power flow. That's mainly an optimization problem. You can see it here on the right side. It mainly aims at here, right there. So it mainly aims at reducing or minimizing the total generation cost in the system, subject to a set of physical constraints that needs to be met. The first constraint we can see is the energy balance equation, meaning that all the energy that's being supplied should be equal to all the energy being demanded, right? So supply is able to demand if we neglect the energy losses in that system. system. And the second set of constraints are mainly the flow limits. What are the flow limits? There is a thermal limit of every transmission line that you can't have more power flowing over that line. So there's a limit over there too. And the last set of constraints is a constraint over the power output of every generator. It needs also to be in a certain range of operation. So when the market is clear, this problem is solved, the market operator generates or gets or calculates something called the locational marginal prices. The locational marginal prices is what we saw in the past two figures. These are the incremental cost of electric energy at every node, or at every bus in the system, or the marginal cost of energy, or if you want, it's the price of energy, right, at every bus in the system. So the LMP is mainly composed of in two parts. If we neglect the cost of losses, the first part constitutes the price of energy. So how much we're paying to generate that much energy in the system. And that's equal in between all buses in the system. We can see that there's no index I over it. So that part is mainly common in between all the locations of the market. However, what differs is how much each bus or each location in the system really affects the overall congestion in that system. What's the congestion? The congestion is almost a violation of the flow limits constraint, meaning that a line has reached its thermal limit, which means that no extra power can still flow on that line anymore. So this line is mainly blocked. No additional power can flow, meaning that if we have two regions in the market or in the system, one region has cheap power, like from renewables or from nuclear, that this power needs to reach to meet a load on the other side. It cannot do that anymore because no additional power can flow, and hence this barrier needs to be penalized in some way, or not always penalized, but it needs to be accounted for. And this accounted for through the LMPIC part of the LMPs, which is the price of congestion, or how much every bus in the system is mainly contributing to the overall congestion in the system. Hence, if there's no congestion, if all the lines aren't reaching their limits, all the LMPs at all the locations in the system are mainly equal. So that's what we saw in the PJM on the left side. You can see that the prices all over the place were equal. And that means that at that time, at 8:52 a.m., there was no congestion mainly in the system. Okay, this gives a big picture. If we go in details, of course, we'll find some congestion in some places. But if we look at the whole thing, we see it seems like the prices are almost equal everywhere. However, you can see in the PJM, you can see like a whole spectrum of prices, which means that in the MISO, there's a whole spectrum of prices, meaning that there's some congestion in some places, right? So as we said, the day-ahead market is based on predictions for the next day. However, the pricing cannot only be based on predictions, right? It needs also to be based on what really happened in real time, in actual time. And that's captured through the real-time market. So the real-time market, if we look at this upper right figure there, you can see the differentiation. I know it's small, but you can see the differentiation between the day-ahead and real-time. So in real-time, some measurements are collected from the system continuously in real-time. These measurements are sent to the system operator. The system operator estimates what really happened in real time, and this gets sent to the real-time LMP calculation. So the real-time LMP calculation happens through a similar model to the one that we just presented before, this security constrained economic dispatch, but here it's called an incremental security constrained economic dispatch to generate the real-time LMPs based on what really happened in the time of operation of that market. So the benefits of every participant in that market is mainly dependent on the day-ahead schedule as well as what happened in real time. Okay? And here we need to present something called virtual bidding. What's mainly virtual bidding? Some entities in the market or market participants do not actually own any load or any generation unit. They are financial entities. They don't own a physical entity. However, they can still be part of the market. How they can do that? Through something called virtual bidding. Through virtual bidding, a market participant can say in day ahead, for example, I would like to buy that much power at that location for that price for the next day. Okay? However, because he's virtual, they don't have anything to meet that, to really buy that power and really consume it. In the real time, they need to sell that much power at the same time at the same location. So there is no difference or there's no mismatch between the energy generated and consumed. But why would a virtual bidder do that? Why would a market participant go through all that hassle? It's mainly based because there might be a mismatch in prices, right, between the day ahead and real time. So in day ahead, that market participant can buy, let's say, 100 megawatt at a location for $20 per megawatt hour, and then in real time sell that same power for $30 per megawatt hour if the price increases. And there's also a risk of it decreasing too. So, and here, however, in our case, the data injection attacker is a virtual bidder. And he mainly, or she mainly aims at creating that mismatch between the day ahead and real time. So it mainly altered the real-time state estimation of the system to make it seem that the system has operated in a different way, and then create a mismatch and then earn a financial benefit through that mismatch. So after saying all that, what's really state estimation in a power system? The state of a power system is mainly the voltage magnitudes and voltage phase angles at every node in the system. Why are we mainly focusing on the voltage magnitude and angles? What's the phase angle? It's mainly because it's an AC voltage, right, or AC signal. It has a magnitude, it has a frequency, and it has a phase shift. The frequency is mainly, assume it being constant all over the system of around 60 hertz. So we don't need to estimate that. What we need to estimate is the voltage magnitude and the phase shift. Okay, so these are the states. If we know those, we know everything in the system. We can get the currents flowing on every line. We can get the power flows flowing on every line. We can get how much has been consumed by a load, how much has been generated by a generator, and so on and so forth. Knowing that means knowing the whole state, knowing everything. So some measurements are collected in the system, and the aim is to estimate those states. In our application here, the states are mainly the phase angles, not the voltage magnitudes. And because we're using a linearized model, and that's mainly being used in energy markets. A linearized model of the system is used in energy markets. The vector of measurements is the vector given by vector z that's collected throughout the system. They can be measurements of power flows, power injection, so on and so forth. And they are related to the vector of states theta, so that equation, z is equal to h theta plus e, h being the measurement Jacobian matrix relating those states to the measurement vector. And there is, of course, an additive error with every measurement. This error is captured to the vector e, and the errors are normally distributed of zero mean and certain covariance matrix given by the matrix R. If you use a weighted least square estimator, in that case, the least square estimator is the maximum likelihood estimator because the errors follow a normal distribution. If we use a weighted least square estimator, we can estimate those states, and they are given through that expression. And then using those states, we can get an estimate of the measurements that we already took. So now we have the measurements themselves and an estimate of those measurements. The difference between those two are known as the vector of residuals. And those residuals mainly give an indication of how much error there was with corresponding to every measurement that we took. So a high residual usually means that there is a big error associated with that measurement. Or let's put it in the correct terms, a high normalized residual. So those residuals are normalized in a way. Shouldn't go deep into those because that's a field by itself. But mainly those residuals are normalized in a way, and the highest residuals usually means that a high residual means that this measurement has a high error. And if it has a high error, it can be counted as outlier or bad data, and it's taken away of the measurement set. Hence, if an attacker is trying to attack some measurements, this attacker needs to make sure that he or she does not affect these residuals by much. Because if the effect is too high on these residuals, that measurement will be counted as outlier and be taken out of the measurement set. And the effect of that attack would be nothing on the system because it's directly disregarded, right? So after all that introduction, let's introduce the data injection attack model. So we have M attackers, and it's an additive kind of attack. So every attack vector, z to the power I, for the attackers from I is equal to 1 to M, because we have M attackers. Everyone adds an attack vector to the original measurement vector Z to form the measurements under attack vector. And having the measurements under attack, we can get the residuals under attack vector. And as we said before, for a measurement not to be counted as outlier, the data injection attackers needs to make sure that the effect on the residual of that measurement isn't high enough. Okay. So we've made it obvious so far that there is a high strategic dependence between the attackers and the defender, because, as you said before, their actions and utility function or objectives are highly coupled together, highly interconnected. So that this strategic interaction can be best modeled through a static strategic noncooperative game. In that game, we have the different players are the M attackers and the system defender trying to defend the system. And every player, the attackers and the defender, have a set of actions that he or she needs to pick from, and a set of utility functions depending on the action he or she took and the actions that has been taken by the adversaries. We'll go through what the action set and the utilities are in the next couple of slides. So the attacker, what's the main strategy of the attacker? Is to choose mainly which measurements to attack and how much to alter each measurement. That's mainly what the attacker aims at doing, right? And the main purpose is to maximize the mismatch between the day-ahead LMPs and the real-time LMPs at the location where the virtual bidding, where this attacker placed his virtual bids. Okay, so because of that mismatch, as we said, he or she can earn some financial benefit. And there is a cost associated with that attack, captured through the term here, CM. And that's very important because that term hasn't also been included much in the literature, or at all, mainly, in the literature before. And this term mainly affects a lot the equilibrium of that game. So it needs to be included. So maximizing that optimization problem has a set of constraints for sure. The first set of constraints is to pass by data detection, meaning that the attack should not affect each measurement, each attack measurement by much. The residual of each attack measurement by much. Because if that happens, then this measurement is counted as outliers, it's taken off the measurement set. That's captured to the first constraint. The second constraint is mainly gives a limit on the number of measurements that can be attacked concurrently. Because the attacker does not have unlimited resources. He or she cannot go and attack all the measurements in the system, right? So there is a fixed number of measurements that this attacker can concurrently attack. And that's captured through the last constraint. Looking now at the defender's side, the defender's strategy is mainly to choose which measurement to defend. Defending a measurement meaning that it's replaced, for example, by a more robust kind of measurement device. For example, a remote terminal unit is being replaced by a PMU, for example. It's harder to attack those devices than the standard devices. All right, so that's the strategy. Which measurements mainly to robustify, to make it more robust to attack. And the goal is to minimize the mismatch between all the LMPs, between day-ahead and real-time, right? And there is also an associated cost captured by the term C0, which is the cost of defending that system. And there's also a constraint on the number of measurements that can be defended concurrently. Okay? So to solve that game, there is two main propositions that we have based our analysis on. The proofs of those propositions are mainly provided in the paper if you guys are interested in it, or we can talk after the presentation about it. I don't want to include a lot of math in the presentation. So the first proposition says that if there is, let's say, two attackers on the system, one attacking at a set of measurements and the other attacking another set of measurements. Because of the network nature of the system, these attacks combined together can have zero effect on the end state estimation result. Because so they can balance out in a way that they wouldn't have any effect on the system at the end. The proof of how it happens and when it happens is in the paper. The second proposition mainly says that an attacker can choose not to do anything, just sit still, and based on the virtual bidding that he did or she did, benefit from another attacker at another location in the system. Because of the network nature of the system, again, one attacker targeting some measurements and affecting the state estimation result can benefit another attacker just sitting still, not doing anything. So not attacking is actually a strategy that can be beneficial in some way. So after these two propositions, let's go through the game solution of that game. We treat the case of two attackers and one defender, and we treat the case of single measurement attack and defense. The action of the attacker is to choose to launch an attack or not. And the defender needs to choose to defend the system or not, and which measurements to defend. So the question that we need to answer here, when is defense actually needed? When it's more beneficial for the system or for the system operator to actually try to defend that system. Maybe in some times or some conditions, the operator does not need to defend the system at all. The system is totally perfect, even if there is attacks. The solution concept of the game that we are dealing with is the Nash equilibrium, which is a strategy profile of the game where non-player in that game, attackers or defender, has any incentive to unilaterally change his or her strategy. That's why it's an equilibrium. So no one is willing to change the strategy because changing that strategy will not make them earn a better profit. So there's no incentive for them to choose any other strategy. That's why it's an equilibrium. So the first case that we treat two cases in that case. The first case is based on the proposition 1, when there's two attackers, when they both carry out their attacks, their attack actually cancel each other out. And the second one is based on the second proposition, meaning shows that the action of each attacker affects negatively the other attacker. So standing still and if one attacker is not doing anything and the other attacker is carrying out an attack, this will affect the attacker not doing anything negatively. So here we prove that there is a unique Nash equilibrium in that case. And this unique Nash equilibrium mainly dictates that both attackers will choose to attack the system. Their attack will cancel each other out, leaving the system unaffected. And the defender has no incentive to defend the system at all, right? Because there's no effect on the system anymore. So in that case, we have proved that that's an equilibrium. So neither the attacker nor the defender has any incentive to change or to deviate from that equilibrium. So let's look at a numerical application of that first case. Let's read the IEEE 9-bus system. There's two attackers. And day ahead, there's no congestion in the system. If we look at this LMP profile in the bottom right corner, we can see that all LMPs in day ahead are mainly equal at all buses, meaning that there was no congestion at all in that system. However, attacker 1 aims to make it seem as if there was a congestion on the system on the line connecting buses 7 and 8 in real time. Whereas attacker 2 in red aims at creating a congestion or make it seem as if there is a congestion in real time on the line connecting buses 4 and 9. On the right bottom side in that figure, we can see the effect of attacker 1 in blue on the LMPs, how they differ while this attack is being carried out, and the effect of attacker 2 as well in red, how that effect changes the LMPs in that system. However, when they both attack together, we can see in the dotted green line, we can see that when they both attack, there's no actually an effect. There's no mismatch between those day ahead and real-time LMPs. And in our work, we have proven that that profile where they both attack and they cancel out, that's actually an equilibrium. So no one has any incentive to deviate from that. The second case we treated is also a case following the first proposition, showing that when they both attack, their attackers also cancel each other out. However, in that case, attacker 2 suffers a loss due to the attack of attacker 1, while attacker 1 benefits from the attack of attacker 2. All right? In that case, we have proven that non-defending in that case is not an equilibrium. There is always an incentive for the defender to try to defend that system, because defending that system will make the system better off, will decrease the effect of the aggregate effect of those attacks on that system. And the game equilibrium in that case highly depends on the considered cost of attack and defense that we have considered in the utility function that we provided before. So here we studied the equilibrium under mixed strategies. What's a mixed strategy is mainly a probability distribution over the action profile of every, let's say, attacker or defender. So let's say the attacker will choose to carry out that attack with that probability, for example. And we studied equilibrium under mixed strategies. That equilibrium is known as mixed strategy Nash equilibrium. And we studied the conditions and the number of and nature of those equilibria in the paper. We're not going to talk about those a lot here because they're not too much fun to talk about. And then we studied the effects of the cost of attack and defense on that equilibrium. Let's go through some numerical applications so we can see what really happens. We'll also treat the case of the IEEE 9-bus system. In that case, if we look at the lower right corner where the plot is, we can see that the LMPs and day ahead aren't equal at all the buses, which means that there is actually a congestion in day ahead. However, the attacker 1 aims at removing that congestion over the line connecting buses 5 and 6. Okay? The main strategy or the main aim is to make it seem as if there's no congestion, whereas there is some congestion, right? So when attacker 1 in blue carry out its own attack, we can see that the LMPs are equal now. So he was successfully able, or she was successfully able to remove that congestion, make it seem as if there was no congestion at all. However, attacker 2 aims at creating a congestion over the line connecting buses 8 and 9. We can see in red the attack of attacker 2, and we can see how it affects the LMPs in the system. And when they both attack together, it also follows the first proposition that we provided. There's no effect on the system when they both attack, because we can see that the real attack on line 3 and 8 together generate the same LMPs as the case of not attacking at all. Okay? However, that case where they both attack and they cancel out, in that case, is not an equilibrium. So the attackers have an incentive to deviate, and the defender has also an incentive to deviate from that strategy. So studying the equilibrium under mixed strategies, studying the equilibrium under mixed strategy, you can see on the left side, we see the optimal or the equilibrium probability of attack and defense for the attacker and the defender versus the increase in cost of defense. Okay? So when this cost of defense increases, we can see that attacker 1, which carries out an attack over line 8, and attacker 2, which carries out an attack over line 3, they are more likely to attack when the cost of defense increases, which actually makes sense, right? So the defender is paying more to defend that system, the attacker will make it seem, okay, it's harder for the defender to defend that system. I'm more likely to attack, right? So we can see that these probabilities increase with an increase in the cost of defense, whereas for the defender, the probability of defending slightly decrease with an increase in the cost of defense. However, it's not as sensitive as that of the attacker for the main reason that a successful attack on the system has a very high effect on that system. So defending the system by the operator and paying a small cost for this is not actually a big deal for him because they need to defend that system. So defending the cost of defense is much lower than the overall effect of the attacks on that system. That's why that strategy of the defender is not highly affected by the cost of defense. However, it's slightly affected, which actually makes sense. If we look at the right side, that we can show the difference between our optimal defense strategy that we have derived, which is the Nash equilibrium strategy, as compared to other two strategies. The first strategy is choosing not to defend at all, which is given by the dotted black line. And the second strategy is given in dotted red line, which says that the defender can just defend any measurement of the system, be equally likely to defend any measurement without thinking much about it. And here we can show that because the defender aims at minimizing its utility function, the optimal strategy that we have derived is much better than the other two strategies, right? So the one in blue is much better than the other two. So our optimal strategy that we have derived is much better than the other two strategies that the defender might want to pick from. Okay? So that's the first game. And the first game is a static strategic non-cooperative game, meaning that all the players, attackers and defenders, cannot observe what the other players are doing, right? They just blindly pick a strategy. There's no observation. Okay, it's not dynamic, it's just static, it's a snapshot. However, we can think of the problem in a way that the attacker can actually see what the defender is actually doing. Why is that? Because a way of defending the system is to replace some weak measurement by a more robust measurement. So replacing remote terminal units by phasor measurement units, the PMUs. Okay, so that replacement is actually a physical replacement. So an attacker that's mainly looking at that system will actually see that there's some work being done in a base station someplace. There's some PMUs that are being installed. And actually, the PMUs are most likely known. Right? I mean, there's a lot of models that say that, and a lot of markets that say that we have these PMUs placed in those locations and so on and so forth. So the attackers can actually see where those PMUs are placed. So the attacker can actually see which measurements are actually robustified, which measurements I cannot attack anymore. Hence, because the attackers can actually observe what the defender has done and react to that strategy of the defender, this can be modeled through something called a Stackelberg game, where there is a leader. In our case, there is a single leader and multiple followers. The leader in our case, the leader is the one who acts first, and the followers are the ones who react to the action or the strategy of the leader. The leader in our case is the system operator. It mainly needs to know which measurements to defend, but it needs to oversee how will those attackers, they are observing what I'm doing, how will they react to my strategy? So if I secure those measurements, how will they react to that? And this needs to be taken into consideration before securing the measurement, okay? The aim is mainly, as before, is to decrease the mismatch between the day-ahead and real time. Where the followers, as I said, the attackers can observe what the defender has done. So they observe the strategy chosen by the defender, and they react to it. They mainly play a non-cooperative game in between them, because in between them, they play simultaneously. They play a static non-cooperative game in between them, right? And the solution of that game, or the equilibrium of that game, is known as the optimal response of the attackers to the strategy chosen by the defender. So the defender chooses, let's say, a strategy denoted by A0, and then after observing that strategy, the attackers play a non-cooperative game and reach an equilibrium. So that equilibrium is mainly an optimal response to that strategy chosen by the attacker. There is an equilibrium by the defender. So there is an equilibrium of that game. So first, we have proven in our paper as well that the attacker's game has at least one pure strategy Nash equilibrium, or one Nash equilibrium not under mixed strategy. It's a pure strategy Nash equilibrium. So every time a strategy or a policy is chosen by the defender, the attacker have an equilibrium for their game in response to that strategy chosen by the defender. So for a strategy A0 star to be in Stackelberg equilibrium, this strategy and the response of the attackers to that strategy needs to give the defender a utility function that's less than any other possible strategy that might be available for that defender. So that's the Stackelberg equilibrium. And we are sure that there is a Stackelberg equilibrium in the case where the optimal response of the attacker is unique to every defense strategy. So every time the defender chooses a strategy, the attacker's response is actually unique. Okay? But in our case, it's not mainly unique. We have proven that the attacker's game has at least one Nash equilibrium, but there might be more. Because there might be more, the defender will most likely play something called a prudent strategy. What's a prudent strategy? The prudent strategy mainly means that the defender will choose to reduce the worst case that can happen to him. So the defender will have a set of policies or set of strategies that he can pick from. Each strategy will generate many equilibria or many optimal response of the attackers. Okay? And then the defender can choose what's the worst case for every strategy I pick. Rank those worst cases and pick the lowest worst case out of all of them. This is known as the min-max strategy. So mainly the defender assumes that the attacker will choose the strategy that's worst to him. Okay, and then try to decrease what's the possible strategy, what's the possible utility function that he can score or she can score. This is captured through the last equality. So let's go through some simulation results. We treat the case of the IEEE 30-bus system, which is a segment of the American electrical power system. We have 3 attackers and 1 defender. In that table to the right, we can see where each attacker places its own virtual bits. So in that case, attacker 1 chooses to buy energy in day ahead at bus 3 and sell that same energy in real time, whereas he chooses to sell energy at bus 4 in real time and buy it in day ahead. The same thing we can see for attacker 2 and 3. And for every attacker, there is a set of measurements that attacker can attack. For attacker 1, that attacker can mainly attack the power flow measurements over lines 3, 4, 7. Attacker 2 can attack the measurements over lines 14, 15, and 16. And attacker 3 can attack the power flow over the lines 5, 9, and 11. So let's look at the attack separately, the attack of every attacker by itself. We can see here in the LMP profile the effect of the attack carried out by attacker 1 if there is no other attackers in the system. We can see it in green. We can see the effect of attacker 2 on the LMPs in blue, and the effect of attacker 3 on the LMPs in red. And we can see on the right side through that column chart, we can see the aggregate effect of every attack on the system. So the attack of attacker 3 seems to have the highest effect on that system, right? It changes, the attack carried out by attacker 3 has the highest effect, as you can see here in red too. It has the highest change, and reduces the highest change in the LMPs, followed by that of attacker 1 and attacker 2. So by looking at that, one might think that, okay, to defend the system, first we need to defend what attacker 3 is attacking. Then, if we still have resources, defend what attacker 2 is attacking, and then 1 is attacking, and then that of attacker 2. However, as we will see in the next results, or the equilibrium results, that's not always the case. So in the upper right corner, in that table, we treat the equilibrium in the first case, where the defender does not defend at all, given by B0 is equal to 0. In the second case, the defender can only defend 1 measurement out of 9 vulnerable measurements. And in the last case, the defender can defend 2 measurements out of 9 vulnerable measurements. Under the first, when no defense is being taken at all, here we can see in the table the strategies of attacker 1, 2, and 3. Here mainly it's these numbers mainly say that attacker 1 chooses to increase the measurement over line 3 by 2 megawatts, and over line 4 by 3.5 megawatts, and over line 7 by 3.5 megawatts. Attacker 2 chooses not to carry out any attack. Attacker 3 chooses to increase the line flow over measurement 5 by 3.5 megawatts, and over measurement 9 by 3.5 megawatts as well, and not touching measurement 11 at all. So when not defending, we can see that that has a high effect on the system, right? We're not defending at all. The attacks are successful. They were successfully changing the LMPs in the system. There is a high effect on the system. However, by defending only one measurement, and here the optimal way of defending is to place the secure measurement over the line that attacker 3 aims at creating a congestion hat, which is the one that's the worst case, right? You can see here that the attacker 3 has the highest effect on the system. So in that case, defending the one that's most critical is actually the best way of defending. However, when we have two measurements that the defender can defend simultaneously, which is the last column in that table, you can see that the optimal way of defending is to defend line 4 and line 5, the measurement over line 4 and 5, which aren't mainly the most critical lines, right? They are not the main target of attacker 3. Actually, measurement 4 is the main target of attacker 1, but measurement 5 is not the main target of attacker 3. So we're not mainly defending the worst case that can happen, right? Or the worst, the lines that, when congested or not, have the highest impact on the system. As you can see, through only defending one measurement, the effect of the attacks, the aggregate effect of the attacks has dropped significantly, right? Defending 1 out of 9 vulnerable measurement, which is a pretty fair fraction, right? And when you defend 2 measurements, there is no effect on the system at all. When these two measurements are defended, attacker 1 chooses not to attack at all. Attacker 2 and attacker 3 both attack, but their attacks are conflicting and they cancel each other out. Because there is a cost function associated with the attack, we can see that if this attacker might not have any incentive to attack, because the benefit that attacker can earn from that attack is less than the cost that attacker pays to actually carry out that attack, right? So including that cost term is very, very important because it changes the equilibrium totally. Here, if we look at the equilibrium, we can see the Stackelberg solution, which is the optimal solution that we derived in the case where 2 measurements can be defended concurrently. As you can see, the effect on the LMPs is 0. It's equal to the one in day ahead. So by defending only 2 out of 9 measurements, the defender was able to mainly secure the whole system. As compared to defending the most critical lines, which are in that case lines 4 and line 9, we can see that there's still an effect on that system. So by defending these 2 critical measurements, the attacks are still successfully, the attackers are still successfully being able to manipulate the LMPs in the system. So in conclusion, we have studied the problem of data injection attacks on smart grids with multiple attackers. We modeled the strategic interaction between the many attackers and the defender. We have derived optimal attack and defense strategies for, in the case of the 2 games that we have formulated, the static game and the Stackelberg game. We have derived and proved the existence of equilibria for these 2 games. We have studied and incorporated the cost of attack and defense and studied how much these costs of attack and defense can actually change the resulting equilibrium. And then at the end, we have highlighted the role of defense. We saw that by defending a really small portion of vulnerable measurements in the system, that has a very high impact on securing our network. And we have also seen the conflicting behavior of the attackers themselves. That they can carry out attacks that can affect negatively each other. So that work has mainly resulted in those mainly 2 publications. We have submitted a paper to attribute injection on smart grids. It's still under review, under revision. And then we have submitted also a paper to SmartGrid.com that I presented last Wednesday. And we got the Best Student Paper Award for that work. Of course, thank you for the National Science Foundation for their support. Thank you all for being here and attending that seminar. And I'll be now open for any questions that you guys might have. Thank you very much.
So I got a question. So one future use case of the smart grid is allowing home operators to start selling power on the grid as a commercial operator would. Now, I'm not sure, with the addition of more private operators, so this is just folks who have solar panels on their house, would that affect the large-scale buying and selling of electricity? And if so, how would that sort of affect how you would go about defending a smart grid?
All right. So the model that we have studied here is mainly a wholesale model. So it's mainly on the bulk energy being sold and bought. So that doesn't mainly incorporate distributed generation, which is a guy having a solar panel over his house trying to sell. However, that actually does affect the wholesale market, but not directly, indirectly, because of. It will take time to go back. That's a system, for example. All those loads that you can see, load A, B, and C, that mainly correspond to a load serving entity, which is mainly a utility company, electric utility company. So if that electric utility company is mainly buying energy from users, then that load will actually drop, right? Because I have other generation, I don't need to buy from the wholesale anymore. But that actually doesn't affect the model itself. It's just that I'm more prone to asking for less energy, right, than what's needed. However, the problem of data injection also exists on the distribution side because there's a meter also sending data, right? So that also attack can happen on the distribution side, and there is also in the part where I did the history review about that work, a lot of people have studied it on the distribution side as well, where an attacker can mainly manipulate those signals being sent from a home meter to the utility company, and mainly to play with the demand side management response and such stuff. Yeah, so it actually exists, but that work is mainly more concerned with the wholesale part of the market.
Okay, thank you.
There was a question there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the power system, but is it possible for the attacker to communicate with each other? Because in your model, sometimes when both of attacker attack, they cancel out. But if they communicate, they definitely can improve the game in the game. I mean, is it possible for them to forward coalition in the power system?
That's actually a very good question. But let me put it in another perspective. If someone is trying to go and steal a bank, will he go and talk with some other stealers to collaborate together to go and steal that bank? Usually when you're doing something illegal, you have to make sure that the least amount of people know about it, right? So normally you don't go and collaborate with other people to, let's all attack the system. Because more collaboration make it more obvious that there is an attack. However, it can also be, it can happen, right, of course. Some people trying to attack the system can collaborate and try to have the best effect on that system. But the natural way of such attacks usually is to, okay, I'm sitting by myself, I'm carrying out the attack. And the virtual builders are mainly financial entities, right? Like banks and those that don't own anything. So a bank will not go to a competitor bank and, okay, let's talk and make a deal and attack that power system, okay? Because the more you talk about it, the more it becomes sketchy.
When you attack the bank, afterwards you should think about how to share the.
That's a whole new.
Yeah. He wants to put the error measurement in the whole system. The attackers have the same goals.
Actually, they don't have the same goals because each one has virtual bidding nodes, some other place in the system, right? So also defining an equilibrium of the coalition game is not also easy because how are they going to split that, right? It's not always obvious to choose how much each one gets, right? So
it depends on the definition of coalition because in coalition they have a transfer or non-transfer.
In that case, not all the strategies will lead to the same utility function, right, or the same utility output. So it might be a little bit hard to try to find an equilibrium for coalitions. But it's also it's a good idea, of course. It can be investigated further for sure.
So you estimated the phasor in your formulation, right? So not estimating the voltage, but the phasor.
Yeah, the phase and phase.
To estimate the state of the system.
Mm-hmm.
So while estimating, you assume the noise to be Gaussian. So phase by definition is limited from 0 to 2 pi.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by by having an error distribution that has an infinite support?
Okay, the error is mainly added to the measurement, and the measurement does not actually measure the phase; it measures the power flow. So this vector of the vector z here is mainly power flows in the network. So we're measuring power flow,
okay.
And using the power flow, we estimate the states.
Another question. Slides 22 and 24, the text doesn't match the figure. So
Does it?
the
22?
lines attacked by the attackers are not the ones shown in the figure.
Yeah, that's the line. The ones in the figure are mainly the bus numbers. The line numbers aren't shown in the figure. So Up there, right?
No, down. For example, the red is attack on line 6.
Yeah, attack on line 6 is the attack of attacker 1. So the blue and the button matches the
Yeah, these two match, but then the buses are the endpoints.
Yes, so the line 6 is the one connecting buses 7 and 8. And line 9 is the one connecting buses 4 and 9. Yeah, I couldn't put all the line also numbers because it gets all messed up. Also here, the same case.